Hi, friends. Welcome to a very special episode of Outside the Studio. This is Tessa. I am really honored and have been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. We have Dr. Carrie on the show. Carrie, you told me how to say your last name, and I'm going to try to remember and not butcher it. Jarosinski.
That
Jarosinski?
was yo, you got it. Yeah,
Okay.
right on the first try. That was fabulous.
I just need to trust myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't we
So,
all just need to trust ourselves a little bit more?
yeah, the moral of this podcast, I think, is going to be to trust ourselves more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this particular episode. So, I want to tell listeners a little bit about you, Carrie. You're a registered nurse, you're a wellness coach, you're an educator, which I think is interesting. You came full circle to teaching, which you talk about at the beginning of the book. And you're an author. Reclaim Your
Yay.
Story. What a
Yeah,
beautiful book. I
absolutely.
love this
Oh,
cover.
thank you so much. I just love theater and I love the stage and I just love storytelling, so hence the theme of the book.
I mean, these are all things like I was saying before we hit record that I feel like you or me, you're who I want to be in 5 years from now.
Okay, let's just back up the train. I think you are who you want to be, and that is fabulous. Right at this like moment in time, we are all who we need to be, right?
Uh, yes, it's
Yeah.
true.
I
And I
mean, it's
have,
great to have goals. We all need to have goals and be motivated, but a large part of this is just enjoying contentment right now
mhm.
with being grateful in what you're currently experiencing, and from someone that's super duper goal centric, that was a really hard lesson for me to learn because I'm always, what's the next degree, what's the next best fill in the blank, and I was so busy chasing that fill in the blank that I really never stopped to appreciate, like, right here and right now in this moment and all that I have already accomplished. And I think everybody has that space, right? We have all accomplished and endured and lived through whatever and met goals, and taking that moment to just stop and savor that is sort of a missing link,
Oh,
don't you think?
it's, yeah, well, it's always like, this is how I feel, anyways. You get to that thing that you've been striving for, and it's like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
You don't even get to take a full breath cycle until it's like, okay, well, I accomplished that. And that feels a little bit not quite as exalting as I thought it would. So, what is next? What's going to be the next thing that raises me up and
Mhm.
tells me, okay, I've made it now. Now I can rest. But it's an endless cycle. And I think I want to back up a little bit actually and talk about your story, your path, your journey to where you are today, because it did seem to me like, from what I could tell, from what I read about you, it kind of came full circle for you, wanting to teach, going through these many different degrees in nursing and then public health, and then coming back. Will you walk us through your journey a little bit, your origin story?
Sure, absolutely. So I started off in college, and I originally wanted to be a teacher. And my brother, bless his heart, said, "Oh, you don't want to be a teacher." Like, okay, I'm 17.
Do you know
Okay.
why? Why did he say that to you?
I really don't know why. I'm
Huh.
not sure where that came from. Maybe he thought I wouldn't be a good teacher. I don't know. So I switched to athletic training that as my program, and this is something that I share with my students, especially my students that are struggling. I failed abysmally at college my first go round. I was really,
Mm.
really bad. And so after several reboots, I was certified as a massage therapist, and I realized I really was interested in like the anatomy and physiology piece of human beings. So I decided to go back and get my nursing degree, and so I earned my associate's degree in nursing, And I worked in long-term care. So working with, chronic disease and end of life. And it's a lot of like family support kind of care as well, not just for the patient or the resident. And, sort of taking this life and birthing them into the next, right? It's
Mm.
people would say, why do you want to do that? Why do you like that? Why do you like working with end of life care? Isn't that like depressing and sad? And really it actually, it can be a peaceful event, and it can be a beautiful event. And helping the patient and the family through that process is actually, um, that's a privilege to be able to do that. So, so I decided that I wanted a little bit more education, and I completed my bachelor's degree. And with that, I was able to work in public health. So I went from, you know, birthing end of life to working with moms and new babies and small children, children with special healthcare needs, childhood lead poisoning prevention, stuff like that. And public health is not that nursey kind of thing where you're giving shots or doing dressing changes or things like that. It's more education. So teaching new moms how to breastfeed their babies, and teaching families about how to renovate their home, their older home, in a safe manner, so that they're not spraying lead dust throughout the house and poisoning their children. So it's all teaching. And I realized I really like to teach. So I continued on to get my master's degree in nursing with an emphasis in education. And with that, I was able to return to the technical college that I earned my associate's degree at and start teaching there. And with that, I just felt like I wasn't done with my education. So I completed my doctoral degree in nursing practice with an emphasis in systems leadership. So, in the classroom and teaching and loving it, and, just embracing those primary prevention activities in my coaching life, like in my nurse slash coaching role, and in my teaching role, taking on a coaching stance to help students through their journey, their educational journey.
Wow. That's a lot of school. so, and I mean, clearly you have a passion for it, and I so admire that. I wanted to just briefly unpack a little bit what you said about your brother telling you you don't want to be a teacher, because selfishly, I have received that same message, and this is where I was going with I feel like you're me 5 years ahead of where I want to be, because I've been looking into nursing programs, and I keep getting the message from family members, oh, you don't want to be a nurse. And so I think my question to you is, because you did kind of come full circle to teaching, and that's something that you do. If you knew then what you know now, having received that advice from your brother, would you have done anything differently?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question, because that was a 17-year-old frontal lobe. And if you were
Mm.
to take my 46-year-old frontal lobe right now and put it into that 17-year-old, boy, I don't think I would have made any of the choices that I made. Right. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't say that. However, what I can say is that you are the best person to direct your path.
Mm-hmm.
Can solicit feedback from others, and you can, chew on that feedback and perhaps apply some of that feedback. However, only you know what's best for you. And if you have this little scratch inside of your skull that keeps telling you, I should go back to school, I should try nursing, I'm interested in nursing, or whatever it is, maybe someone out there that's listening is, I'm really interested in taking a yoga certification training course, or, whatever that little itch is that doesn't go away, that's something that needs to be noodled out and investigated. It's there for a reason. And I personally, I'm a go with your gut kind of gal.
Mm.
you can take the warning, the heeds of warning from folks. But if you know that it's something that you can't shake, it's definitely something to go down that rabbit hole and investigate. And as a nurse, by all means, I'm definitely going to say go for it because it is a fabulous career. It's a fabulous career because you can be a teacher, you can be a coach, you can be that person at the bedside that births someone into the next world, right? Like it's really a special space that not a lot of people have the opportunity to exist in. And if you have that space in your heart and in your head, you know it, and you go with it. Like I'm sure there's people out there that you would ask and say, hey, you ever thought about being a nurse? And people are like, heck no. Because it's not for them. That's like if you were to ask me if I wanted to be in finance.
Yeah,
Whoa.
no.
Oh, no,
No, thanks.
thank you. So I would just encourage you to investigate that a little bit more.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me how people decide for you what based on their own, it must be based on their own life experience about what you should and shouldn't do with your life. I just find that so fascinating, but I digress. I would like to,
I think that's like a whole other podcast, like an hour
right?
podcast of how people's projections affect our perceptions.
Yes. Oh, and that's a great title. I love that title.
Okay, write that down because I'm not going to remember it.
How people's
Projection.
projections. Thank you. I was
Yeah.
always going to get it back.
Impact our perceptions. I like that. Hey, maybe that's the title of the next book.
Hey, that could be. I'll share it with you in case you want to use it.
Fabulous.
So I want clearly you have some really smart, talented, wise children. And you give them some shout outs in your acknowledgments. And this one line, I keep going back to because I find it fascinating well, I have this bias in my mind, and you can tell me from your experience if this is true or not. But I find it fascinating to think about the medical industry not really teaching wellness per se, in the sense of like, let's say somebody's studying to be a doctor and they don't really get that much education around wellness and nutrition. And that might be not true. And you have the experience. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But before we go there, the line is from your son, Dylan. Let me find it really quick.
And right away in that book, just write and highlight and scribble, and it's a workbook.
I know. And you did say that. So I was like, oh, okay. I have it bookmarked and dog-eared and all that stuff. All right. So here we are. Here's the line I wanted to share. So during one of our conversations, this is you talking with your son, Dylan, he reflected that while health was taught to him in school, wellness was not.
Mm-hmm.
And so relating that back to your experience in school, in nursing school, and then the varying ways you worked your way up, I mean, was that true for you? Was wellness taught to you in that field?
Yes. So first of all, I just want to put out there that this by no means is a dig on our K-12 folks, because I have the utmost respect for them, and they have 12,000 mandates that they need to get through. So do they teach health classes? Absolutely. But, does every child get the opportunity to learn about wellness and what that really looks like in action, outside of diet and exercise? And that's a whole other conversation as well.
Yes.
So there's that space in K-12 that, they're under the gun for a lot of mandates, and they need to stick to that. I can say in my training as a nurse, my associate degree, it's kind of bare bones, right? You get the skills, And then when you go on for your bachelor's degree, you round out that training with like your gen eds and things like that to get your bachelor's degree. And then, of course, I went on for my master's degree, and that had an emphasis in education. Did I have a wellness class? No. My doctoral degree, did I have a wellness class? No. I mean, could I have sought out an elective with wellness? More than likely I could have, but I didn't. So a lot of this was, almost self-taught by having that first introduction to public health, learning about what the social determinants of health are, which I would love to have an hour-long podcast on just the social determinants of health with you. So that was a really great introduction to how impactful this is to our health. SDOH accounts for about 60% of our health outcomes, so quite impactful. And I think training has changed. So there are some more components. My training has been a little bit dated. Obviously, I've been in the career pathway for a long time. But as far as I am aware, like in medical school, I think there's like 12 hours devoted to nutrition. And, I mean, out of how many years of schooling. So really, historically speaking, wellness and primary prevention activities have not taken a front seat in traditional medical type training. Now, that being said, I do have to just interject that I feel as though one of the blessings of the COVID pandemic was a heightened awareness on well-being and primary prevention because of the disproportionate number of folks that were affected disparately that had chronic illness, or that were older adults, or that were obese. So I think with that, folks maybe have a little bit more of a heightened awareness of wellness activities and what that might look like, because it was so disparate.
Yeah. There's so many directions I want to go. But you did touch just briefly, you mentioned like nutrition, which is a topic that I could have a whole entire podcast about, because I find there's so many, and you're a health coach as well. Did you have a specific separate certification for that?
Oh, separate certification. Yeah, not specifically for nutrition. I mean, I did have an add-on for that, but yeah, I have the ACE health coach certification.
Okay, the ACE. Yeah.
And then I also have the National Wellness Institute Certified Wellness Practitioner credential as well.
Okay.
So that takes a more like holistic approach.
Gotcha. Oh, that reminds me, I did want to ask you about that. If you could define holistic health, is this a loaded question? I'm just curious because it's such a buzzword these days. I feel like holistic health is such a buzzword, but it's also important to understand what we're talking about when we say holistic health. I could dive into your book and tell you what I've read. I could tell you what I believe, but I'd like to hear it in your words.
Yeah, so holistic, first, I just want to put out there that health and wellness is not diet and exercise. Like that's probably the other main reason why I wrote this book, is because, people scroll through their Instagram feed, or, see on other social media platforms, or they go to the doctor for their annual exam and they have one measure, which is the BMI, and then they get a talking to if their BMI is outside of quote unquote normal limits. So really there's that focus, that hyper focus on diet and exercise. And as I explain in the book, if you address all of these stage setting activities, in addition to holistic health and well-being, meaning the determinants of health and wellness, in addition to the different dimensions of health and wellness, that is how we can seek to find balance in a holistic fashion. Like we are human beings, and we are very complex entities, and there's so much of ourselves and our being and our lived experiences and our environment that play into our health and well-being, that most folks don't even consider. So I hope, and hopefully you could agree with me after reading this book, that I try to really impart that there are so many different aspects that one needs to consider to find this equilibrium, to find this balance, to find this holistic wellness within themselves. And that could mean, you know, looking at your relationships, so your social well-being. Are you connected to your community? Are you connected to your neighbors? Do you have a strong, at least one strong friendship where you can call that person up and talk to them about anything, or have a need and they will help you with that need? Do you have strength in a partner or someone else close to you? So it's things like this that most people don't appreciate the incredible impact it has on health and well-being. I mean, social isolation, let's just take, for example, older adults. Social isolation is a huge indicator of poor health outcomes and morbidity, right? If you are an older adult and you're not connected to your community, you're not connected to your neighbors, you're not connected to friends, or you don't have a healthy relationship with your partner, you're more than likely going to have chronic disease, have a larger burden of chronic disease, and die earlier than your counterpart that does have those relationships. So taking a look at all of these and all of those stage setting activities really provides us this foundation from which to launch, that maybe in the end we can feel better prepared and feel more confident and feel more strong and have more self-efficacy, to be able to look at our diet and look at our exercise and be successful in a sustainable behavior change. And that's what the goal is, right? Like, let's take that example of going to the doctor for your annual physical. They take the one measure of BMI, which is completely antiquated and really only tells us averages. It really doesn't tell us any state of health for the most part. I mean, there's a small correlation between maybe some poor health outcomes. But really, we have much better measures. We have belly to hip ratios, we have belly to height ratios, we have, your blood work, we have things like that give us much better data than the BMI. But a lot of folks will go in to the doctor, they'll have this BMI that's quote unquote out of range, and the doctor will say, or the provider, I shouldn't say doctor, the provider may say, well, you really need to look at losing weight. And then what happens is the individual will be like, oh, I'm scared now because my provider said I need to lose weight. And they'll be like, I'm going to run a 5K, or I'm going to throw out all the garbage in my house. It's these very large interventions that are reactionary to the bad news. And unfortunately, those very large interventions most often are not sustainable.
So BMI, body mass index, as you mentioned, an antiquated way to measure relative health of the physical body. And you mentioned a couple of other ways to measure this. And again, I want to point out that we're talking about physical health, like physiology. And you said, I think I heard you say belly to height, belly to hips. And so I'm gathering, and I know this to be true based on research that I've done too, but I'd like to hear your opinion, that the belly, the fat that surrounds our vital organs, which typically is around the waist, the belly, is a key indicator of physical health.
Right. So the larger the belly, the poorer the health outcomes, basically. Yeah, it's ratios. So for example, if your waist circumference is less than half of your height in inches, you're in a relatively good space. So it's stuff like that you can just do a quick little math figure and be like, okay, I think I'm okay. Or okay, I think maybe I could, focus in on this area a little bit.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and then I know you talk about micro adjustments or micro interventions in the book, and instead of doing that knee-jerk reaction of freaking out and signing up for a 5K and throwing all of the junk food out of your house and getting really stringent and militant about changing your diet, because to me that kind of stuff is a really short-term fix and it's not sustainable, generally speaking. I mean, there are those of us who can quit cold turkey and do make big changes like that, but in general I find that's not really sustainable. What are some ways that we can make it more sustainable, and are those micro interventions?
hmm So long before the micro interventions, we could maybe, can we put a pause on that and circle back?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah. So before the micro interventions, I'm a huge proponent of, you just have to be in a great headspace to be able to make any sort of sustainable change.
Mhm.
That's the first step. And so it's this awakening process to what you're telling yourself. And that's sort of the basis of the book, is what is the story that you are telling yourself or have told yourself for, ever since you can remember.
Mhm.
And it's this inner self-talk, probably is how folks have heard this term before. And I call it the inner narrator in my book. Sometimes I call it the inner jerk, because a lot of times
Yep.
we have these microaggressions toward ourselves that hurt. And if you're coming from a hurt space, you're not going to be able to have any sort of sustainable change. So the very first step is sort of getting inside of your head and actually listening to this self-talk, listening to this narration. And this is not something that a person can be like, oh, I listened to my self-talk for 10 minutes this morning and I'm all good. It's a process. It's like learning any new skill. It takes time and intentionality. And you know, like a good space to start listening to this would be maybe when you're doing your morning routine, or maybe when you're cleaning up the kitchen after dinner, like these mundane tasks. Sort of just awakening to what your head is saying. And for the most part, it's probably just some mundane things like, I need to get the kids here, I need to remember to go to the bank, I need to work on this presentation, whatever, fill in the blank. But once you start really taking notice, you might observe that you are a person that sort of hangs out here in the future, worrying about things. So these insidious little anxieties like, oh gosh, if I go to work today and I run into so and so, they might say this, or maybe my boss was upset about this email that I sent yesterday, or, this narration of, well, maybe I should say this, or maybe I should do that, or what if this happens? It's all the what ifs of your anxiety thinking about the future or future events. Or you may notice a trend of looking back into the past and ruminating on events or things that you've said or experiences that you've had that maybe haven't gone as well as you wanted them to. So maybe you're thinking like, well, if he would have done this, I wouldn't have had to do that. Or I should have just said this because they said that to me and I was in the right. Or, like we have this looking back on the past and ruminating. So
Mhm.
neither one of these spaces are good to be in, right? Because you're not living in the present. You're not acknowledging your emotions right now and feeling your feelings right now and taking in the environment right now. So that is part of it. But then the other part of it are what I call these little microaggressions of, maybe you step out of the shower and you just refuse to look at the mirror, or when you look in the mirror, you're just like, ugh, like
Mhm.
not necessarily a narrator saying anything, but your mind is telling you something, right? Your mind is judging you. Your mind is telling you you're not worthy. Or Maybe it's that you sent an email to your boss yesterday and you're regretting it. And you think to yourself, I am so stupid. I'm risking my job doing, stupid stuff like this. So again, you're labeling yourself as stupid. You're identifying yourself as stupid. So these little microaggressions really, they bear weight. And the longer they go unchecked, the more weight that they bear. And a person cannot, if you don't feel worthy, right, as a human being, why would you be worthy of any sort of sustainable behavior change for your health and well-being?
Mm.
And that's like these core beliefs that people have. Like, we see this a lot in college. Students come to us and say, I can't do math. I'm just not good at math. I just can't do it. I'm not even going to try. Or if I'm going to try, I'm going to get an F. I don't know why you're making me. Right? It's these negative core beliefs that we have about ourselves. So if you feel that you can't change, you can't learn math, then why even try? There's no space for growth or change then. If you just back yourself into this corner of I'm stupid, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy of this change, I'm dumb, I'm fill in the blank. I mean, I ask my students to do some journaling exercises for one of the classes that I teach. And sometimes I have to like just get up and take a break because we identify some of these negative core beliefs that they have about themselves. And boy, the stuff that happens in people's heads that they consistently tell themselves that, it's not good. And it's definitely detrimental to one's health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel as though we're sort of stuck in this societal culture for one reason or another of this cycle of depression and anxiety, right? I mean, we hear some pretty horrific statistics of kids in K-12, of college students, of Johnny Q public, that the rates of depression and anxiety are, I mean, we're talking about in the 70s and 80%. I mean, that's substantial. We have a lot of very unhappy and anxious folks in our society. And I think we can all be aware that folks that are anxious and sad or depressed probably have some rough core beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm thinking about in the beginning of the book when you're starting to talk about this, you use the example, I loved it, of Stuart Smalley, the SNL character. And
Okay, I
gosh
have to
darn it.
give credit for Kristen Neff. So if you guys have not read any of Kristen Neff's work, she is like the pioneer in self-compassion practice. So I do have to give credit to Kristen for the Stuart Smalley analogy. Yeah.
It's
But
a
yeah,
good
it's
one,
great. It
right?
is. It is. It's
Uh,
perfect.
Well, and that brings to mind to me, because it's kind of this, in this industry, the wellness industry, and I find this to be true too. There can be this stigma of poo-pooing affirmations as kind of like, I'm just going to sweep that thing under the rug, ignore that it's there, and look in the mirror and tell myself, gosh darn it, people like me and I'm good enough. And I can't remember the exact quote,
Good
but
enough.
you know what
I'm
I mean?
smart enough. And gosh darn it, people like me.
Yeah.
I totally think it's okay to tell yourself.
Well, yeah, totally. And also, when we're talking about changing that insidious narrative, how do we be authentic and real with ourselves and turn that negative into a positive?
Yeah. So the first step is that awakening. So just being intentional and listening for it. And then the second step is stopping it. So I've identified when, I'm offering myself these microaggressions or reinforcing these negative core beliefs. So I'm stopping that. And then, yes, I'm flipping the switch and turning that into a positive and saying, well, You know what? I may not look the way I want to look in the mirror right now, but I have to say, like, my stretch marks are battle scars from giving birth to two big bouncing babies that were very healthy when they were born. Right? Like, and I earned those.
Yeah.
so so really, like, taking that and turning it into either a silver lining, a positive saying, um, or just even something neutral. If you can't get yourself to that point where I can say, I embrace my stretch marks, like they're battle scars, maybe you can just get to some sort of neutral space to say, what, you know what, they're there and they're a part of me and it's okay.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's baby steps. It's so here we go. It's these micro
Yeah.
interventions.
Yeah. So full
That can,
circle. Yeah.
yes, exactly. So once you're able to identify this little jerk and stop this little jerk in their tracks, and flip your switch, then you get ready for some introduction into some behavior change activities. And there are some stage setting, that I call stage setting activities, to get you ready for that sustainable change as well. And I would have to say that, at least for me, but I think probably for a lot of folks, is the biggest one and the toughest one is some forgiveness.
Mm.
Which people are like, why are you talking about forgiveness? I just want to be healthy and well. Okay, I know it's tough and it takes a long time. But again, with an intentional practice, you can work through that. So when I say forgiveness, first and foremost, I want to talk about the self. So can you acknowledge that you've got this inner critic, this inner narrator, this little jerk that's been running around your head, that you've acknowledged it, that you're flipping the switch? And can you forgive yourself for those perhaps negative core beliefs that you've held about yourself? And then rooting around a little bit deeper and maybe trying to figure out where those core beliefs came from. There might be something hiding or lurking underneath there, that maybe you need to forgive yourself. But just that inner narrator itself, and acknowledging that you've been harming yourself by holding these beliefs, forgiving yourself for that. So everybody has an inner critic. And you know what? It's there for a purpose. It's there to keep us safe, honestly. Like,
Mhm.
so you can say, hey, thank you. Thank you for trying to keep me safe, but I don't need that anymore because I've worked through that. Right.
Mhm.
So if it was a past trauma, or, something, maybe you were a jerk to someone else, right? Like, we're human. Sometimes we're mean, or we do bad things, or we do stupid things. Um, so being able to forgive yourself for that. And again, bringing yourself into this space where you feel worthy of changing and becoming a better iteration of yourself. And then also forgiving others, which can be a super duper tough one as well. And as I mentioned in the book, sometimes takes some therapy or some years
Mhm.
of therapy,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
again, like, we all come with these really different lived experiences and past traumas. And if you look at ACEs, the adverse childhood events, most folks walking around in the store, you look at them, they've had several ACEs under their belt. We all have baggage, right? And this is, when stuff happens to you when you're a kiddo, it stays with you for a long time. And sometimes that's really, really hard to heal. So I never underestimate the power of working with a professional to look at those past hurts. But there's lots of these stage setting activities. And then once you are ready to embrace some sort of behavior change, then you can start with these micro interventions. And basically, one reason why I like to have folks start with micro interventions is because it builds self efficacy. And self efficacy, just simply stated, means that you have a belief in yourself that you can achieve something. So if you can gain a little bit of traction and be consistent with that and do it for 2, 3, 4 weeks, 2, 3, 4 months, and you're like, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to add on to that because I have been successful in this area. And then just slowly adding on and adding on. And I did this with stretching. So stretching was quite the Achilles heel for me, as I explained in my book. And I don't know why. I was just super resistant to stretching, and it feels good and I feel good afterwards. But I just had this mental block that I don't want to stretch. I don't have to stretch. I'm not good at it. That, yeah, the belief, the core belief, right? Yeah. My core belief was my hamstrings are going to snap. I'm not good at this and I'm not even going to try. Okay. So what I did was I just started with, okay, I'm going to just like take a couple of stretches and I'm going to say 3 days a week, 3 days a week for 5 minutes. I'll see if I can handle that. So I did. And it was kind of, fits and spurts. And then after a while, I was achieving 3 days a week. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can do this 5 days a week. So fits and spurts, doing it for 5 days a week. I'm like, okay, right? Like, I feel good and I feel better. And maybe I'm a quarter inch closer to my toes. I don't know. But even if I'm not, I feel better. And I know I'm doing something that I should be doing so that I can prevent injury for when I start running again. And sure enough, like, I started running again and my hip didn't hurt. Wow. Mind blown, right? Whatever. So now, I mean, I'm at this point where I have a very stable routine, 20 minutes every morning. That's part of my morning routine, a minimum of 6 days a week. Most often I'm doing 7 days a week, but it was over the course of like 8 months that I got to this space. Now, if I were to say, wake up and be like, oh, my hip hurts because I was running and I haven't been stretching. And I were to say, all right, 20 minutes a day, 6 or 7 days a week, I'm going to do this. It wouldn't have lasted. It wouldn't have lasted because I didn't build a foundation, and it was reactionary to pain. Mm-hmm. So once the pain goes away, that initial, hey, you got to do something here. Once the pain goes away, I would stop. And I did that. I did that for years and years and years. I cycled through that craziness, right? Yeah. But it's the same thing with that, like, BMI example. You get scared because the provider says you have a not so great BMI. You have to do something here. You get scared. You have the knee jerk. You do it for a few weeks. It's not sustainable. You go back to what's comfortable.
Yeah. I think so many of us can relate to that, especially with listeners here with building a meditation practice or yoga practice. It's like, okay, I want a meditation practice. My doctor says I'm too stressed out. I should try yoga. Where do I even start? How do I even start? And it just feels daunting. It's like, so hard to even know where to start. How do I sit? Can I lay down? What do I have to think about? Oh, I have to clear my mind. It's like all of these questions we have, all of these stories we tell ourselves, we can apply it, I feel like, to any facet of our life. I do want to switch gears a little bit and make sure I touch on one last subject. Sure. And that is, let's say we have our foundation built, we're in a really good headspace, and we're ready to layer on this healthy, let's say diet, nutrition. Let's say exercise is dialed in, but diet is elusive. And here's what I struggle with. And as a health coach myself, so many different diet theory out there, so many different people telling you, this is the next new fad. This is the next latest science. This sweet potato is going to kill you. This sweet potato is going to cure you. So where do we go with all of this information with diet and nutrition? Where do we start with that?
Yeah, that's a loaded question too. And it's really hard to decipher, because like you said, this headline will say, oh, this new research study
Mhm.
says coffee is fantastic, and this research study that comes out 6 weeks later that says if you drink coffee you're going to have 6 years left on your life, whatever. I'm
Right.
just using this goofy example here. So it's really hard to follow the research, especially when you're not in the industry. Like, let's just say you're working in finance and you're just trying to clean up your diet and exercise, right? So I mean, first, don't overestimate or underestimate the power of having a health coach. So having that Sherpa with you by your side to help you sift through all of that. But part of my book that is probably infuriating to folks is that my nutritional guidance for people is to simply eat real food.
Mhm.
So I don't count calories. I don't count carbs. I don't look at labels, because primarily I eat foods that don't have labels.
Mhm.
So if you can strive to reduce and, fingers crossed, eliminate fast food, that would be phenomenal. Like, if Americans could just do that, that would be phenomenal. If you can take it a step farther and reduce processed foods. So I'm talking about like those Franken foods, those ultra processed foods like, Doritos and Cheetos and Ho-Hos and stuff like that. If you can work to reduce those and have them only be treats for like a birthday party or something like that, that would be absolutely fabulous. I mean, that is totally cleaning up your diet right there. If you can strive to eat whole foods, and it's hard, don't get me wrong, like I strive to do this too. And I have a thing for chocolate. Don't get me wrong, I really like my chocolatey candies, which is really hard to avoid at Christmas time. um, but if you can strive to make your meals at home just using whole foods, honestly, your numbers are going to be fabulous. You're going to feel much better. You're going to sleep much better. Um, Honestly, that's my. It seems small when I just say eat real food, right? Which I'm sure people get infuriated by. But seriously, if you can literally just eat real food, your blood pressure is going to come down, your cholesterol is going to normalize, your blood sugar is going to normalize. All of your like metrics, like your biometrics, those those will come down and or normalize for you if you can simply eat real food. It takes a lot of work though. I'm not going to lie. You're food prepping a lot. You're making
Mhm.
all your own homemade meals, and you can't, like, you're like, I'm hungry, I want a snack. You can't just open up the pantry and grab something. You have to go to your refrigerator and see, do I have leftovers from
Mhm.
lunch? Things like that. So was that what you were driving at, or did
Yeah, absolutely.
okay.
I love that advice. It's something I often say. One of my mentors, one of my health coaching mentors says, eat as close to the earth as you can.
Yeah.
So what's grown out of the ground as it is, like a carrot grows out of the ground. You don't need to do anything to that carrot to make it edible. It doesn't need to be processed except by putting it in your mouth. Digestive enzymes help it break you down. That's where you get the nutritional value from the foods that stay close to the earth. So I absolutely believe in that myself. And also, I'm with you on the chocolate and the wine and the coffee and all of those things.
Yes.
I love, I love, I love.
Yeah.
So I operate under the premise of everything in moderation, even moderation in moderation. But I do notice a difference when I stay close to whole foods, close to eating with things that come directly out of the earth. Absolutely. Thank you. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I want to be mindful of your time. And I would love to know if there's anything else that you wanted to share, anything that you were hoping I would have asked you, but I didn't, anything at all that you want to impart before we say
Oh.
goodbye.
Yeah, I so Eat real food is one of my mantras. The other mantra is sit less and move more. So honestly, those micro interventions, if you can just do that, sit less, move more. But just please just understand that being healthy and well is not diet and exercise. I know that these last few minutes we focused a lot on that, but there is so much more. And I feel like, we spent an hour chatting, and we just, you know, it was just the tip of the iceberg with all of the other determinants and dimensions of wellness that really support um, our lifespan, right? Our quality of life and our lifespan and our health span. How many healthy years do we have the privilege of walking this earth with? And so if we can just be mindful again of the balance and that holistic wellness concept, instead of being hyper focused on our social media feeds and on diet and exercise, oh, we can find so much joy. We can find so much joy. And by switching off that inner critic, we can just embrace who we are. We can reclaim our spirit, and we can just find contentment. So that's my wish for everyone. And that's my wish in writing this book, is that, try to learn my hard life lessons that I learned through my storytelling, on how to really embrace joy and find contentment in life.
Yeah, that's my hope with this message, that listeners are inspired to try something new, to something scary that, deep inside, you need to make a change. And it's hard. And yes, those little baby steps and laying that foundation will help make it sustainable. But truly, for me, that's the takeaway, is how can I make this journey towards wellness holistic and sustainable? Those are the questions I usually ask myself when I'm trying to affect habit and behavior change for the long term.
Yeah,
So,
that's fabulous.
yeah. And thank you so much, Carrie. I really appreciate your wisdom. I appreciate you sharing your story with us, sharing your amazing book with us. So congratulations on birthing this baby.
Oh,
Reclaim
thank
your
you.
story.
Thank you so much.
I imagine you're on I know we talked about the socials, but where can people go to
I
connect
know.
with you?
After I'm like demonizing social media,
The
yes,
necessary evil.
you can find me on Instagram.
Right?
Yeah. So my website is boldcontentment.com. My Instagram is bold contentment, and my Facebook page is bold contentment as well. But because I do have very healthy social media boundaries, I do not get alerts to any activity on any of my apps. And so I check them probably about twice a day. So if you do reach out to me, please have patience, because I'm just trying to be healthy and well myself. But I would love to further the conversation with anybody. And also, I want to throw out there that if anybody is doing a book club, like, I would love to just come and do a quick little 5 or 10 minute Q&A when you do book club, if you choose to talk about my book, just because I love talking about this stuff and making new friends and meeting new people. So
Oh, what a lovely
Dave,
invitation. That's so cool. Thank
yeah,
you.
I have a
Um,
link on my website actually under the services. It is free. Like, I don't charge for this. I
that's
just
awesome.
literally like talking to people. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that comes through. It's been a real pleasure, Carrie. I'll make sure all of these links get into our show notes so people can ask you to come join their book club and connect with you. And yes, patience. Have patience. Let's all have a little bit more patience with each other and with ourselves. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Carrie.
Oh, thank you. This was a fabulous time spent together.
Well, everyone, that concludes another amazing episode of Outside the Studio. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something new, maybe remembered something old, maybe felt inspired to apply something to your life. You can hear my dog in the background. She's doing a little happy dance. So Daisy enjoyed it. Anyhow, I wanted to just pop in here to wrap us up to say a couple of things. Number one, I have such an amazing team that helps me put these podcasts together. Without them, I wouldn't, be able to bring these amazing conversations to you. So Thank you to my producer, my director of creative services, my sound editor, my engineer, Consistency Media. Don't know what I would do without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the amazing creation and artistic musical genius, Drew Lovern. Thank you so much for putting together this music specifically for outside the studio. So unique to the show, only place you're ever going to hear it is right here. Thanks, you guys. You make my world go round. Stay well, everyone. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, share on the socials, especially if it's a show that you think, hey, this could help somebody else. That's what this is all about, right? We're sharing information so that we're better, so that we're inspired, so that we're lifting each other up, and we're learning how to be in this world, living on this planet to the best of our ability, sharing information and inspiring one another. And that's my hope. That's my hope for the show. Take care.